welcome everyone in September 23rd, JupyterLab dev meeting. Got a long week here in New York, doing lots of good JupyterLab stuff. Let's just go around the room, short status reports, and then anything else that needs to be talked about. Fernando, let's start with you since you have to leave maybe a little bit early.
Yes, had some good discussions at Bloomberg in San Francisco this week with folks from the company, kind of about the collaboration, about how things are going, I think it was valuable and productive. And otherwise, I'm very much. I just pulled down the new build, but I'm about to start playing with it. But I won't steal your thunder.
Okay. Peter?
I'm just here as a fly on the wall, keeping up with the latest. I saw the cookie cutter repo for the JupyterLab extension, so I was just listening in, curious. Want to start playing with it.
Cool. Great. Darian?
So the changes and bug fixes and behavior updates to the completer that I've been working on emerged now, and I encourage people to play with it. I wrote a small thing, a small API in the console that allows you to pass in arbitrary code, which sounds not very useful, but Steve will tell you why it's useful. Right now I'm looking at the build because it seems like there are certain cases where if you run the pip install, you might still end up with it might still break for you. Basically, if you have stale node modules. So I'm trying to make sure pip install will always work. And that's it for me. Yeah, that's it.
All right, picking up where Darren left off. The ability to inject code into the console is what we're using to run code from an attached editor. So you launch a console for an editor, pick your desired kernel, which is intelligently populated based on the type of the file extension of the file you're running, and then you can highlight a block of code in the file and run Shift-Enter, and it will inject that code not in the prompt that you might be still editing, but before it. So it shows up as the most recently executed cell and is still part of your history, and injects. So you still have the variables and the history associated with that running execution. And then if you hit Shift-Enter and you don't have any text highlighted, then it will execute that one line of code. So we have this basic. We're trying out this one form of interaction between the text editor and the console, where the text editor itself doesn't have a session associated with it, but it is sending code over the fence to an existing console, or a console that is a sister console that it has spun up. Also this week, worked on documentation and gave a presentation about the extension builder repo and the workflow around that, and the live extensions command line tool. Working with Dan, who I guess is not on the call this week, on the cookie cutter that enables you to build live extensions. We're almost done with that. We hope to have that done in time for Strata next week. And next, I'll be working on the ability to add data to an existing output in the notebook. So the use case is for something like Altair to add a PNG representation of itself into that output, so that it can statically render the PNG on something like NVViewer. But only the restricted ability to add a non-existing MIME type to your own bundle is the API we're looking at right now. And that's it.
I have a very quick question. I just did my usual git pull and let the hooks do the whole rebuild, and I'm getting 302s and a completely gray screen when I try to load lab. Is anyone else seeing that? People smiled, so evidently.
More.
and I don't understand why it's happening more often exactly. Maybe Steve understands it better, but the changes that we're seeing more often now require a full-blown git clean XDF and then rebuild everything.
Yes, because we changed the way fundamentally JupyterLab was built. Recently, that's been required more often.
Yeah, when you rebuild, you need to npm install in the root directory and npm install in the JupyterLab directory. An extra step.
Well, based on feedback from Darren, we might not even need to do that. So
I don't think you need to do that. I just did it. I did the git clean and then npm install and then pip install, and it looks like it's working fine.
Pip install. Yeah, it'll probably work.
Right, but even the whole reason we stripped npm install out of the subdirectory, Darren found that if everything is already satisfied, it can run off of Wi-Fi. So what we can do is remove explicitly JupyterLab, install explicitly JupyterLab, and then run npm install, and we'll get back to the old workflow, but it'll work offline. But I think they have a way out of this temporary mess.
Yeah, if you're using pip install,
pip install will still work. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was afraid, but I wanted to double check. So I'll do the full rebuild. Do we think this is a kind of a temporary in transition issue, or do we think that kind of from now on full clean installs will be kind of the standard workflow?
I think it is temporary. We should be done mucking about, hopefully, in that area.
I just added the December 23rd. This week's lab meeting notes to the hackpad.
Everyone else should add their notes too. Yeah. Ian, want to go?
Yeah. So continuing to work on a proof of concept for real-time collaboration. I've got basic text mirroring between different editors in what's called in-memory mode, which is happening locally on your machine. And I'm currently digging into the Google authorization API to get it working between two different non-local machines. That's a work in progress.
So I'm still working on the launcher prototype. So it works. I've had it working, but I'm just re-implementing it using the widget stuff and learning that as I go along and stubbing my toes and things like that.
Qpop works in JupyterLab now.
Woo!
And so that provides some feedback to the cookie cutter and looking at upgrading the TypeScript 2.0, which is a can of worms for the documentation. We're almost there.
Had a good week here. It's been great being in New York. I think one action I might have here is to change the colors on the labels for the JupyterLab repo so they're more consistent. And I did also post some links to UC Berkeley's accessibility policies and guidelines. So those are available and actually on our dev meeting notes.
So going back, so I submitted a PR earlier this week that changes the default table styling for HTML tables in the notebook, and went through some design feedback on that, got that merged, and so I think that's significantly improved. And then Grant Nestor is backporting that to Classic Notebook, so we get that in there as well. One thing we noticed is that so the Phosphor has virtual DOM APIs, but they are they're very unbiased, unopinionated about how you use them. And as as different people start to use the virtual DOM APIs, we are finding that there wasn't really enough sort of best practices established by the API. So in JupyterLab, I created a model and a view class that establishes the best practice, at least within JupyterLab, for using the virtual DOM. and that API essentially follows what React is doing. So you define a view object that has a single render method, and that render method has access to this .model and returns a virtual DOM element. So it's a very simple sort of best practices set of classes. I've been sort of helping with some of the design questions around the attaching text editors to consoles. In master now, you'll notice that the inspector doesn't appear on the right. We changed that over to being in the main doc panel. So if you do Command-Shift-P, there's a command now to open the inspector, and you can put it anywhere on the page that you want. And there's still some redesign that we're thinking about doing with that, but I think it's a little more usable being able to put it wherever you want. And then starting to shift gears back over towards design-related things in advance of Strata. And then this coming week before Strata, one of my tasks is going to be to create basically get Altair working in JupyterLab using one of the new lab extensions. So I'll be sort of dog fooding all that stuff and making sure it all works. And what am I missing?
That's a lot.
Yeah. And then just reviewing code, discussing, pestering Steve with lots of questions.
I wrote a Jupyter enhancement proposal, which consists in separating, making a new repo that would be a bare Jupyter server that doesn't provide the legacy notebook frontend, and would be sufficient to run JupyterLab, for example. And that new project would essentially be a fork of notebook that is essentially renamed and remove everything that's notebook specific. And also it would have a different mechanism for server extensions. So details are provided in the enhancement proposal. Some people already gave feedback, and I started doing the work of sharing off the server from the notebook repo, and with a net line count of minus 25,000. So it's yeah, it's in progress. The tests don't pass so far. I'm still working on it.
Which that brought up the point that if you look at the graphs, the contributor graphs in the IPython repo, I just realized the other day that Fernando has a net negative line count in IPython. Somewhere there was a some sort of boundary that was passed. You contributed 10,000 lines less than you added now to the IPython repo. And Men holds the record for 350,000 lines negative.
Min is the anti-coder.
Yeah, you're an anti-coder.
He's removed nearly 1 million lines of code. You're muted. You're muted, Fernando.
Since we move so much code around between repos, we end up with these kind of rather bizarre looking statistics on our repos, which is fine.
Matthias comes out as the only positive code addition person.
Wait,
in the first 4, yeah, you're positive a couple 100,000 lines as well. Anyway, is there anything else we should talk about?
Feels like it.
It's like Cal Poly, the Cal Poly people, they've been doing well.
So their school starts, so they're transitioning quickly back to part-time mode. What else? Oh, so one thing I'd like to make a decision on is the command palette right now. So if you do Command-Shift-P, the command palette opens, and the first time it opens, you get a blank text field, and you can type like create and create console for editor, and that will work. But the next time you do Command-Shift-P, the text from the last command is still there, and the UI is filtered by that text. So that the state of it doesn't reset. And the reason, so existing command palettes are mixed on this. So Visual Studio Code resets the state each time. Sublime Text does not. So when the command palette was originally done, an arbitrary choice was made to follow the Sublime Text model. I'm in favor of the other mode, mainly because you don't get to see all the commands that are available when you reopen it. You're filtered down to the few commands that would have been filtered based on the last command you ran. And I think it shouldn't. Basically, I think it shouldn't be a stateful UI. And so,
does it have up arrow history?
No, but that would actually be a great way of
Because
resetting the states but offering up arrow history.
Yeah, I think that's the right solution. It's just to reset the state, but to get up arrow history, and then you immediately get the filtering back, and it's the same mental model that we have in other contexts.
No. So this is a dumb text box, and up is for navigation of the commands. That's what up should do.
Yeah, that's true, Fernando. In this context, up and down navigate the actual commands.
The other thing that was pointed out was if you try to filter, I mean, that text box up there is for filtering.
Yes.
So often you'll type something to filter the list of commands, and you might click on one or press enter on one to run it and realize that's not the command you wanted, and go back to the command palette, and now you have to refilter the list of commands instead of just keep that filter active.
But my argument, though, is that we should optimize for successful usage, not
unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Well, no, but it could be increased font size, right? You want to do it a couple of times.
Yeah. Or it could be, I'm working in the notebook now, I want to filter to the notebook category. And I don't want to make this, and maybe you optimize that by making it very easy to create new command palettes that tear off command items.
I think it's really difficult to. You want to optimize for the most common cases. It's not to say those other cases won't happen, but
common for who? Common for experts, common for newbies, common for
general usage.
Okay, so that's
common across our entire user base. Like what fraction of the second and third and fourth command palette usages are repetitions versus new commands?
Right.
And I would say
if there's a majority across all user classes,
I would be very surprised if it was not new commands.
So, it'd be interesting to sort of think of how often you use command palettes in other applications. I think I'm pretty comfortable using Sublime Text, and yet the only times I use the command palette are to use package install or package upgrade. I never use it to run actual commands on my text. I memorize either the keyboard shortcuts or I look them up in the menus, but the command palette for me is just for this one little thing. And in fact, it's like a rarity that I use it. And I don't know how other people use command palettes, but before continuing on making user experience decisions, it might be good to do some research to see how much usage command palettes get in general.
I mean, I find myself using it, wanting to use it quite a bit in JupyterLab, and being pretty frustrated at really simple use cases. That's my, and part of what I'm finding right now is that there's starting to be enough different things you can do in the UI that, I mean, the more items you have in a set of things, the less useful manual navigation is, and the more useful a search-based interface is. This is the Yahoo versus Google lesson. And I think our UI is going to end up with enough items that the command palette is going to be used. Like I mean, that's.
I think we would make it very, if we make it like the GitHub issues and pull requests and Google, we make it very easy for us to filter a command palette in a variety of ways and then save those command palettes. Then it'll really be useful to
They
have quick filters.
I mean, I really like your idea of having a history, Fernando, but that we already are using up and down. Now maybe we could use J and K or like
Control P, Control N. Come on.
Well, I don't.
Yeah. J and K might be useful for typing in the J and K characters, though.
Yeah.
That's why you need you need Control P, Control N.
I mean, we could.
If history with a key, even if it's with a key binding, what history would let us do is basically settle on the Visual Studio Code model, which is stateless, reset the state always, and say, well, if you want state, yes, it goes through a key binding, but you can get up arrow, effectively up arrow, and I understand it's not just the up arrow, but Control P or whatever to fetch your history back, and then otherwise, if you don't know that, well, it is like Visual Studio Code, which I can't remember even if the command palette has any kind of history. But it is a reset state model which works.
But so how is that? Is that tied to your user account? Is it your user history? So when you open up a kernel, the kernel gives you history, and that's well understood. But when you are talking about history of your usage of the UI, we're talking either a different API call or something stored locally that you lose when you switch browsers. Like these are things that we need to discuss.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Sorry, it could be ephemeral, where it's only stored locally for the session on the client side. It's more of a convenience, and it's not persisted across sessions, and it's just while you're there, you get a few items on it, and then if you close the session, it starts clean again. I don't think that would be a big deal. Just an idea.
I mean,
I'm not going to push on it. I was just offering an idea.
I mean, the other option would be to have an actual recent category that always shows.
That's what I was asking. Yeah. So I was just going to bring up the same thing. I mean, could you extend, the palette that you're searching there to include, things like last action and have a description in that item of, the last action or last 5 or whatever it is. That way you can actually search over the things you just ran, by typing last to begin with or whatever you wanted to.
It'll just actually, you know what? So you guys were interested in extensions, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. That's a perfect extension to write because it's easy to import a command palette. It's easy to have pick a number and just add that to the palette and just have I think that's a really interesting idea.
But at least how I'm thinking of it, that recent section would always show. And so you couldn't do that without modifying the command palette filtering mechanism itself.
Oh, you mean in the UI it should always show? You can't filter past it?
I mean, it's just always there. So you can always use the arrow keys to pick a last command, a recent command.
Yeah, hold on. 3.
I mean I like this better than some mysterious keyboard shortcut because then it's there's a visual indicator that okay, well there's my last command. Let's do that again, or let's pull that one up and edit it. There's I think that is probably the best usability, but rather I don't think it should be to use see the last command. I don't want someone to have to type the word LAST. That seems then it's not discoverable. It's hidden. It's Whereas if there's just literally a recent section at the top, it's always there. It's special.
But what if all they have to type is :L because it's a category? Then it's just like a keyboard shortcut.
It should be a category, but it's a special category that's not ever removed from the filtering.
But then it's weird because then you would have to type the category, press enter, which then changes the filter. Which, I mean, what you mean that's for the actual last command you executed, or
like I can't
reset this filter state.
I'm not.
It would be nice if you actually had the last command you actually executed, so if it was like increase font size, you could do.
Yeah, let me just show you. I'll share my screen and talk through this.
While Brian is doing that, I want to point out that we have an issue open for this. It's 908. I put that in the notes. And I also, I sort of, when I created that issue, I said that this could be a setting, and there's pushback on that. But the reason that I think that this should be a setting is we've just had a very long discussion about this. It sounds like, I don't want to speak for Darren, but it sounds like he's leaning against it. I do not want the resetting thing either. And I think because I think that's isolating a whole class of Sublime and Atom users who are used to that kind of behavior. And I think that there's enough of them out there that, like, if we want people to to feel comfortable working in these tools, I don't know. I just think it's.
Can people see my screen? You can't. Oh, you can see my mouse. So what I'm envisioning is that above console, there's a section called recent that lists the top N recent commands. Maybe it's 3.
That you actually executed?
Yes, that you actually executed in this section. So right now, like when you first open JupyterLab, there's no recent section. And then if I go and I run a command, so if I say create
redo, you could just even say redo, : whatever.
So if I say new file, it would clear at that point, like the command palette would clear the text, and then the view you would have at that point would be recent
or redo.
New file.
Yeah, redo : new file.
But yeah. When you filter though, so say I don't want to use a recent, when I start typing in there because I want to do something entirely different, does the recent get filtered out or not? Because what if I search and I'm trying to find something completely different, it comes back as the second hit.
Yeah.
After I filter now.
I think it should be filtered out.
Yeah, we could filter it out as long as this view here, and actually, yeah. So down arrow, you could immediately down arrow to the recent thing and pick it if that's what you wanted. And then you could filter it out when you start to type.
Okay, cool.
That I think has a nice balance between like immediately giving you recent.
That gives you the most recent command, but it doesn't have the notion of keeping your filter around in case you realize that was the wrong command or whatever, or you just want the notebook command to be available.
Like some new plugin, because those are alphabetical ordered, some new plugin that I installed now doesn't make new notebook the default top thing that gets run when I type in new. Now it's new, I don't know, new application or something like that, right? So alphabetically, the new thing gets filtered to the top. So I just press the wrong thing.
But again, I do think we should optimize for success, not failure. Like I mean.
That's a fair thing, and I think that's in tension with what the user based expectations are, right? So, for example, like the doing a down arrow thing is inverted from the way that you work in the terminal, right? You go up arrow to go to the last thing you type instead of when like redoing like I just did something and I want to redo it. Go up arrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different. The terminal doesn't have a visual selection of items that you would pick. It's a different UI, so I think there's different expectations.
Hey, Brian. I have a very
Yeah.
I was going to say, I have a really simple use case question. Say I've used the search and then I want to go back to the original commands that came with, like I'm a naive user and I want to go back to the original commands when it first opened. How do I do that?
So you're saying, so if I start to search,
Right.
and then you want to go back to the full set, you just delete characters so it unfilters.
Okay. And even if I've got like a history in there, I just...
Yeah, so if I type new and I see the new things and I say, no, I don't want those, I just start hitting backspace and it unfilters.
Okay. And then if I had done a bunch of like searches already and then wanted to go back to the original state that when I first opened JupyterLab, can I do that?
No. Right now, no.
Okay.
But once you've run a command, so if I do new terminal here, so run new terminal, notice the command palette stays in that state. The only way to get it out of that state is to do Command-Shift-P and then hit start to type or hit backspace and it underfilters. And yeah. And I think that's a usability problem because users get back to the command palette and they may not realize that the text has been entered. They're going to say, hey, wait, where'd all the console commands go?
Right. That's what I was sort of getting at.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's actually what would happen, because your command palette stayed up on the screen. There's no confusion about why it's in its current state. If it disappeared after running a command and you brought it back up, you might then be a little confused, but it remained on your screen. There's no surprise that it's the way it is.
No, but I mean, I can do new file and then go back to files and now do Command-Shift-P and it's still in that confusing state. But that can
Sure, that's true, but yeah. If you choose to hide something and then you bring it back and it looks the way you left it, I don't think there's a reasonable way of calling that a surprise.
But I mean, I've run, and the reason that I discovered this is that I use the command palette, and like 20 minutes later, I go back to use the command palette, and I get puzzled by, wait, what happened? I forget that I ever issued a command. I start wanting to look through them visually, and it's like, wait, where's console command? Ah, shit, it's already filtering for me. Right. And those two events happen 10, 20 minutes apart. Like I completely forgot.
What if when it collapsed, it cleared the text?
So my suggestion is, as a first step, why don't we just clear the palette, see how that affects usability before we start considering more dramatic changes that aren't really in the purview of other command palettes. Like I haven't seen a command palette that does history, but why don't we just start clearing it and see if that feels different, if that feels better, or if that feels lacking and we want more.
I mean, the decision to clear the palette is independent of recent commands or command history type things. That is, I mean, the reason in the history stuff mitigates some of the things that we lose by clearing it, but those are independent decisions.
Yeah. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, is there a key to dismiss the palette once I'm done with it?
Command P.
No.
Command-Shift-P.
Command-Shift-P.
No.
No.
No, that gives it focus again. So, I mean,
so Command-Shift-F toggles files, but Command-Shift-P only opens it.
Yeah.
And the problem, the reason we took it off is that if you do two Command-Shift-Ps in a row to try to run two commands, if you have the toggle behavior tied to that, the second time it hides the command palette from you rather than unless we were to auto hide it after you run a command, then we could make Command Shift P toggle state.
Right, and that goes back to being closer to what Atom and Sublime and those tools do, right? You run the command and then it auto hides until you press it again. Yeah.
Yes, and Visual Studio Code does that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only reason we haven't, or one of the reasons we haven't done that is that unlike those other environments, our command palette squishes the rest of your user interface when it's open. And if it was flying out from the side and collapsing back often and quickly, you end up with your whole UI just squishing and unsquishing, and that feels a little weird.
Did we want to say anything about the third-party extension?
Well, I would like to actually make a decision on this.
Would it help if we did use the Sublime pattern of highlighting the text when it comes up?
It is highlighted.
It is.
So it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can just press backspace.
Okay. But it's still, I mean, humans are really good at excluding visual information that they weren't looking for. And so if you come back wanting to scroll through the list of items, you'll never look up there. And
I think we've tried out having it there. It's bothering you. Let's try it out, clearing it, and see if it bothers Paul.
Clear and dismiss?
Let's start with just clear.
Just clear.
Be conservative on that. My thought is if we wanted to move to an instant dismiss model, we might want to reconsider having the command palette be more of a hover UI rather than a panel UI.
So it's clear that
I think having the main dock panel be squeezed regularly in a way that would surprise the user is like it's a huge, like, it would be like it comes out, it goes away. Comes out, it goes away. It's a little bit jarring.
So is that all right then?
Yeah,
clearing it.
I would like to try it and see what. Okay.
The cookie cutter, Pete, you were asking about or wanting to talk about the cookie cutter. I thought Pete was the one that brought it up.
I was just listening in case there was any, discussion of it, and I heard some, but mostly it was I'm coming to be a fly on the wall and hear what's going on, but that's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's in progress. I was going to work a little more on it today, but I think,
Dan just posted a comment about power handling the cookie cutter in general in terms of running npm code from setup.py, questioning our current assumptions. Which is good.
I guess one question we had about cookie cutter is we could make sort of generic cookie cutters, like a JavaScript and a TypeScript cookie cutter. I think those are sufficiently different directory structure and everything that you probably want those different. But we could also make a cookie cutter for adding, a new document handler, another cookie cutter for adding a new widget type, another cookie cutter for adding a new renderer. So we could make a ton of different cookie cutters for extending different parts of JupyterLab. Or we could just make one cookie cutter that is sort of a general extension and then have examples of how to extend it. Thoughts?
I think we will
Eventually.
We will want a lot of different specialized cookie cutters. How those are implemented, I'm less like, are they all truly separate cookie cutter recipes, or is there some plugin mechanism that allows you to pick, like, have a single cookie cutter recipe that contains sub recipes? I don't. So from the implementation perspective, I don't care.
This morning I was thinking we should make a cookie cutter that will generate our cookie cutter recipes.
Exactly.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And I wondered how the escaping would work. But, I mean,
That's a great idea.
the UI is shared probably across all the cookie cutters, but I don't think we
I think we should do whatever gets us back to 100 repos. Can we do that?
Oh yeah. Yes, we're losing that game, aren't we? I think for now we'll just do a cookie cutter for TypeScript, a cookie cutter for JavaScript, and I'll move the leaflet widget over to the cookie cutter, trying to use that as a test case for the cookie cutter. See where we go from there. And try to standardize the setup of UI and stuff first. Okay. Any other? All right.
Right.
Bye, Internet.
Bye, Internet.
Yep.